One thing that I think the industry can do better on is the actual day-to-day language we use when we talk about solar workers. I can't tell you how many times I'm doing an interview and the person refers to all of their solar workers as guys. And I know there are women installers out there who are hearing that and being like, I guess I just don't matter. I'm such a small amount that I'm not even accounted for.
Hello, and welcome to Solar for All, a podcast focused on the intersection of clean energy and the issues of race, class, equity, inclusion. And we are glad to have our guest, Kelsey Misbrener. Kelsey is the senior editor of Solar Power World, one of the important magazines in our industry. She's been in that role for 5 years. And she's an Ohio native. She went to Kent State University for undergrad and is just up the road from our headquarters, based out of the Cleveland area. Although obviously Solar Power World serves the entire solar industry and is a well-respected national organization. All of the show notes, should we discuss items that are interesting to the viewers, are available at solarforall.show, and that's spelled out SHOW. And without further ado, welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Equity, inclusion, justice. These are probably things that are, not necessarily new topics for many of us, but they seem to be rising in importance and focus within our industry. Are you seeing that as well in the folks that you're interacting with?
Absolutely. For a time, it sort of seemed like there was a lot more one-off efforts to increase diversity, where it would be like women in solar or people of color in solar featured, once a year or once every 3 months. And I'm hoping that we are shifting more toward just weaving in that inclusion into everyday life in this industry. And I know some organizations like Nextracker and SEI actually have launched an entire scholarship program for women and non-binary workers in the solar industry. So I am seeing actual investments, right? Putting your money where your values are instead of just posting on International Women's Day or something like that. So I'm really inspired by that kind of move.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. So tell me again, this is Nextracker, which most people are familiar as one of the leading, if not, clearly the leading single axis tracker manufacturer. They're providing cash money scholarships for folks to go get on-site training with Solar Energy International. Do you know how much money or how long this is or how big of a program it is?
I don't know every detail, but I think it's a 6-week program through SEI. The only requirements are the people have to have a degree in something related to solar. I think it was a number of scholarships for specifically women and non-binary workers.
Super, super. So yeah, we've had Solar Energy International was represented here on the show in, I think, episode 3. We'll include that in the show notes. So it's great to find out that, again, they're still at the forefront of training and now getting a partnership in place with an industry leader to, like you said, put some money where their values are, put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. We do see quite a bit of people, in June, suddenly all the logos have rainbows now. And that's, maybe that might have been a controversial and important thing in the past. Now it's almost, nice to have, but doesn't really move the needle much. What are some of the other actions that you're exposed to or seeing that are giving you positive feelings and of positive momentum?
Yeah. Another thing that sticks out to me is organizations committing to not having panels anymore. So having conferences where the panels are made up of at least one woman or person of color, but more and more I'm seeing that it's a full mixed bag. It's people from all backgrounds. And that is so much more interesting hearing the perspectives of people who are not just white men. So that is a huge, great step forward, and it is becoming more normal. One thing that I think the industry can do better on is the actual day-to-day language we use when we talk about solar workers. I can't tell you how many times I'm doing an interview and the person refers to all of their solar workers as guys. It's just like, my guys are out there doing this. And I know there are women installers out there who are hearing that and being like, well, I guess I just don't matter. I'm such a small amount that I'm not even accounted for. And I'm sure that also turns off any women or people of color or anyone who's not the standard solar worker from even exploring a job in this field. So just being mindful of the words that we use.
Yeah, we need folks to say, hey, that might be a career choice for me. This industry is growing so fast, and already the labor and talent shortage is real. We should be as inclusive and welcoming and encouraging as possible. So let's unpack that a little bit. So it's manpower, it's my guys, it's workmanship. I mean, that's a legal term that we're seeing in contracts all the time. And, it's kind of a term of art, workmanship. But that just reflects that historic bias and that exclusivity that, I don't know. I think some of our listeners might say, what's the big deal? But I think you point out pretty quickly that for a female tech up there on the roof saying, don't I matter? It is a big deal. And then also for the industry, for that kid in high school or that person who might be considering a career shift, is this a field that's going to appreciate me, even though I'm a woman, even though I'm a non-binary, person, even though I'm a Black person? I think we've got so much room to improve. There's a master slave language in software. I think it originally originated. And so in inverters, we're seeing master and slave in the technical manuals. When you have multiple inverters, one might be called historically called the master. I have not seen that. Yeah, it's been a technical thing for quite a long time. And think about how blind, lots and lots of good, moral, thoughtful people, they see master slave in the technical literature and they're just kind of numb to it, and they don't see how much baggage those terms have, how much it pushes us in the wrong direction. So I'm going to call it SolarEdge. SolarEdge, the inverter manufacturer, responded well. The Amicus community put together a letter and said, hey, this is an outdated, offensive term. Can you review your manuals for it? And they said, yes, we agree. And they scrubbed their manuals. I'd love to see all the other inverter and software manufacturers in the industry follow suit because, again, it might not be a big deal to folks that are blind to it. But if you put yourself in the shoes of an African-American or person of color, this is not an inclusive and welcoming thing to have in the technical literature.
Not at all. No, I've never seen that myself. That is pretty clear that needs to change for sure.
Yeah. Well, you've got a megaphone. Yeah. You've got a powerful voice. Obviously, Solar Power World is part of a team, and there's lots of other folks out there. But are you all doing more purposeful editorial content as the industry changes to try to help us nudge ahead?
Yeah. One of the biggest challenges, I think, from an editorial standpoint is sourcing people who are not all from the same background. A lot of, we know the numbers, the CEOs and the C-suite people that we're often talking to are white men. And so me, Kelly, and Billy definitely try to get more sources that do not look like that. Just again, for that representation. So you're reading our magazine and you see a woman's name and you're not surprised. It just becomes something more natural and helps to give the authority where it's due to people who aren't just the same set that it's always been. And then the other part that we are making more of an effort to do is source more stock photos showing women installers. Just something like these small acts can just make it more normal to have more different people in the industry. And we know that it matters. So we are making efforts, and we ask anyone who has some great photos that we can use of women installers, of people of color, send them over. We'll give you credit, and we will so appreciate it.
All right. Well, you've heard it here, folks. You've got a mission. I know NABCEP Solar has a ton of female techs. We don't yet. We're trying to recruit and reach out, and there aren't as many candidates out there, but we're definitely proactively working at our company to cross that barrier, and we'll celebrate it when we do. And also people of color. Again, we're a very white industry. I know, like in California and on the very large construction sites, there's plenty of Latinos, but often they're in the low-skilled, low-wage kind of pickup labor space. So at the electrician level and at the PV tech level, we've got room to improve. Are you working with, or do you have on your radar some companies that are either owned or led by, or have more than one or two token members that represent the non-white groups?
Absolutely, yes. Well, okay, I should say mostly the diversity in CEO level is mostly white women. So definitely more work to do there. But yeah, we definitely know a handful of our top solar contractors are run by women. And in the past, other people have sort of tokenized them further and, done pieces on, here are 5 women CEOs. How do they do it? And we try more to just ask them the questions we would ask any other white male CEO. And again, just normalize it instead of further marginalizing them and asking like questions that only women get asked in that position.
Yeah. How do you balance, as a white male,
right.
I have never been on a panel and had somebody say, how do you balance family and professional career? It's like,
right.
Come on.
Right. Exactly.
But people do that, and I think that they're blind to it. I think that they just, I think we all have our biases. I've been reading books and discovering and just owning and admitting my own racism and my own sexism, just my own inherent bias. And, when I was younger, I wouldn't have said that. I would have really resisted, owning that. But I think that the conversation's evolving to the point where folks are starting to realize it's okay to say what's true and to admit that you have a bias, because unless you own it and admit it, you're not going to grow. You're not going to make progress. So as a journalist, you're trained, and you've learned and you've come up in a world that was, I don't know, it's changing rapidly right now. Outside the solar space, are you watching a lot of journalism and editorial decision-making change and evolve? Is there stuff that you want to share with our listeners about from that perspective on these issues of inclusion and equity?
Man, I don't know. That's a big question. I mean, from back when I was first entering journalism school, things have changed so much. I was just sort of exiting my own bubble that I had grown up in, and thinking back to the things that I reported on and the worlds that I entered back then kind of makes me cringe, because I was learning a lot, but I don't know. I don't think I was equipped with the tools to really explore everything yet. At this point in my life, I have done a lot of reading, a lot of like you said, understanding my own privilege. And I think it is so important for journalists to come from that space, especially when they enter different bubbles, different parts of the world they weren't exposed to before. Something that I personally am working on being better is as far as disability and making sure that I root out any anti-disability words in my writing or language that are very normal in common conversations. And I think I really came to that by covering a solar installation company that employs people who are deaf. And it was such a learning experience for me to ask them, how do I write about this? How do you want me to characterize your disability? So unexpected things have really helped me to grow and explore how I can be better as a writer.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you for that thoughtful answer. I'm assuming that it was Axiom Solar out of Texas.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great story. I've not yet met any of their deaf employees, but my understanding is that, and maybe I'm not, maybe they wouldn't choose the word deaf. Maybe they would choose a different phrase. I think your approach of being direct and saying, how do you choose to be represented? How should that's the empowering approach. Some folks want to be called Black. Some people prefer African American. I think the answer is they get to pick. We don't. And just like with alternative abilities or disabled, lots of different ways to approach it, and everyone's different. But back to that story, we'll put a link here to your piece on them, and we're hopeful to get a pod with either their the actual folks on the team or some of the folks from the company to talk about that. When I was having a beer, I forget if it was Eric or who it was talking about in ASL, they invented the sign for inverter with like two linked hands moving back
Oh
and
my
forth.
gosh.
Like just the whole idea of like coming up with an ASL sign
Wow.
for a technical thing that we say, because in sign language, if you don't have an actual quick sign for it, you have to spell it out or spell out something, and that slows down conversations. And they're saying
Yeah.
inverter, 1,000 times a day on the job site. So boom, and they've gotten it actually incorporated into the official, dictionary. So yeah, it's a great story. We'll link to that in the
That
show
is
notes
so neat.
and try to
Yeah.
get them as a pod because that's a good story. So it's not just color,
Yes.
it's not just gender, it's abilities,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be being an immigrant too. I know that we've got a pretty technical world where folks from South Asia are pretty well represented in the engineering spaces, but I bumped into a guy from Nigeria who is an electrical engineer working for a utility. And I just in a friendly manner, started asking him his story. And gosh, what an uphill battle he had to get a degree, to get his education, to come to America to, it's the classic story. And then within America, because of his accent and his skin color, he's just got, headwinds. He has to work twice as hard as I would have to work in that position to be successful.
Yeah.
And, our industry is just filled with these amazing people doing amazing work. And hopefully it'll be not an amazing thing to have those stories, in the future. Kelsey, you were talking, when I asked about the journalism piece, you talked a little bit about your coming up, and when you were younger, you get that first job out of college, or just as a young person in the kind of the commercial grown up real world. A lot of young people are cautious. They're defensive. They want to go along to get along. They're not sure. They don't want to make waves or disrupt or hurt their chances for success. Was that part of what was going through your mind as you're kind of starting out in your career? And do you have any advice to any of the younger listeners on the pod for how to navigate those challenges of seeing bias in the workplace, but not being exactly sure how to act on that?
Yeah, definitely. When I started writing for Solar Power World, it had been a little while since I'd been out of school. I had another job that was non-writing related, so it was very intimidating to get into a semi-technical writing career after that. And I definitely did feel kind of dumb the first few stories I wrote, talking to people who have been in this industry for so long and are talking a different language than me. But it just took a lot of perseverance and putting my head down and learning what I needed to know to have those conversations. And even within the company, after a couple of years, it became clear that our CEO really, really valued our input. And so I have brought a number of things to him through the years. With one of the bigger things that was really cool was there was a big worry about there not being enough poll workers last November. Time is a weird loop now, but I was worried about it, and I was worried about older people not being able to be poll workers. So I asked him if he would be open to letting us have a volunteer day to go work the polls, and he took my suggestion and he made it available to people. I actually ended up getting trained but not chosen to work that day. But it showed me that my input, even as a young person, on a slightly, maybe controversial issue of working the polls was valued. So it was really cool to see that. And I know not everyone is able to bring things like that to their CEOs. So I understand that too, but I just thought that was really neat.
Yeah, well, to the CEOs and C-suite folks listening, one more example of leadership matters. And it's not always, huge groundbreaking things, but lots of little things that add up.
Mm-hmm.
How about, again, mentorship? Or is there anyone that kind of took you under their wing or that you could run ideas by that helped you in your career or helps you maybe even to this day as you kind of navigate some of these more challenging issues?
Yeah. A person that I really respect and that I'm very lucky to be able to spend some time with here and there is Abby Hopper with SIA. I think it really started with their annual DC Solar Policy Conference. I was there and just reporting, and she asked the audience if there were any questions after she spoke, and a handful of men's hands raised. And she sort of took a beat and then said, "I'm sorry, but women typically do not raise their hands. They're not the first to jump with a question. So I want to offer an opportunity for any women to ask a question." And so, sure enough, a number of women then raised their hands because she made space for them. It was so cool. So just seeing leadership like that, and just being around her. She's also had some women's networking events at her house after that conference when it goes on, and I've gotten to meet some amazing women there too. So just the way she holds space is what I would love to do as I grow in my career.
Wow, what a great story, and what a great, again, small but apparently very useful action there to just to have that knowledge that, from third grade on, guys raise their hand, me in classrooms, and the girls are somewhat trained. I'll go ahead and say it. They're trained to defer to the guys in the room, and that's just part of our culture that I think is changing as we put a spotlight on it. But obviously, folks, in that room were products of it, and it was right there in place that all those women with questions didn't jump to the front of the line. I guess Lynn Jurek might be probably the number one female CEO out there. I know she just recently stepped back to, I believe she still has a board position, but has empowered another female CEO to replace her at Sunrun. Have you interacted with her at all? Have you gotten a chance to talk with Lynn?
I have not gotten to meet her yet, but I would love to.
Yeah, me too. She's a dynamic leader. I remember reading her profile in Inc. magazine. I don't know if it was 8 years ago or when it was, but she's a cover story. And again, it was one of those things like you had mentioned before about, are we marginalizing people by having a focus on a female-led organization, or are we putting a spotlight on true leadership and saying, and they happen to be female? I guess it's a lot of the ways that you phrase it and you spin it. But I read about her in Inc. magazine, and our company was much smaller at the time. But it was really not just the fact that she was turning the industry around and challenging Solar City, but she's won. She's number one. Sunrun is in the pole position right now. It's pretty fortuitous for any women leaders out there that are looking for examples or evidence that there is space at the top. How about advertising and the business side of your magazine? And maybe this is too close to home, but are there ever any challenges with your editorial content, and then some of the big spending advertisers saying, "Hey, tone it down," or "This is too controversial," or "Don't run our ad near that story"? Any of that stuff come up? And you don't have to name names, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, we have not run into that with any of our more social justice pieces. We have not had any pushback.
Well, that's good to hear. It's good to hear. I'm just always kind of looking under the covers and in the corners to see if there's any examples of that stuff. It probably is. There's probably stuff, especially in finance. I think our industry has a lot of tree hugging true believers on the EPC side and some of the tech side. But once you get into finance, it's turning into really big business and really cutthroat stuff that I would say is more prone to be, part of that good old boys network and some of the darker sides of capitalism and business. I don't know. Maybe we'll do an investigation and try to find out some examples of this stuff from maybe the EPCs out there. We'll say, well, here's a couple examples of some sexism or just the behavior that we want to have less of. And we can put some public shaming towards these folks. I don't know. In general, I like to, call out what we want more of. It's a lot more positive. I'm more of an optimistic guy, but I think that there are stories of bad actors out there and bad actions that we can all learn from. So I'm open to it. If any of our listeners have some subjects they want to reach out to us, please give us a ring at solarforall.show. Well, Kelsey, this is the second half of our show where we're going to go into the Better Together section. I talked a little bit to you about this before, where we have our guests bring some of their favorite books, music, wisdom, authors, etc., for our listeners. This is your chance to run the show here. The first part is the note and promote section, where if you've got a book or some ideas or articles you want to amplify.
So I was thinking about this, and one of the most impactful books I've read lately is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. And it's all about turning away from the fast-paced, mindless world of social media and turning towards nature and your environment around you. And she sort of got into this by noticing crows that would come to her balcony and sort of making friends with them. And then that developed into her just wanting to learn more about her region, and whether it's historical, whether it's with the geographic issues. And so that just really resonated with me because I am a birder. I've been birding for probably like 8 years now. I take photos of birds. I watch them. I think they're awesome in my backyard and traveling too. So the book just really, really hit home with me because I am definitely at my most at peace when I am just out there focusing on nature, whether I'm hiking, birding, backpacking, just off my phone, off of the distractions. So highly recommend, that book.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Do you have any advice or wisdom, any kind of nuggets of I don't know, smartness that you want to share that someone gave to you that you'd like to pass on?
I'm just going to go back to Jenny Odell and encourage people to just sit in your backyard and notice the wildlife. Even the squirrels are entertaining the heck out of me now because I just pay attention to them, and they like groom themselves like cats. They take little naps on my tree branches. They are just fascinating. So just noticing a little piece of nature, even in your own backyard, is just so worth it.
I love it. I love it. I can picture, when you said that, I pictured a little squirrel kind of like licking its claws and wiping its mouth there. Funny. Well, I love being in nature as well. And I think the world would be a better place if more of us spent more time breathing and doing nothing, especially if we're surrounded by green and the living forest. So yeah, now it's the playlist. We've got the Better Together 1+1 playlist, and you can find this on Spotify and Apple Music, and also at the solarforall.show. So our guests get to show us what's on their queue, or maybe what's in their old cassette tape pile. Give us a classic song that is your go-to, and then something new that you've found that our readers might not have heard yet.
Okay. I didn't go too far back for my classic, but it's just a person I've been listening to for a long time. Sturgill Simpson. I'm sure a lot of our people are fans. He just put out a outlaw country album, sort of like Johnny Cash vibes, just awesome cowboy tunes. And the album is called The Dude and Juanita. And it's a whole story, and it's amazing. Just a fun time.
This is so hilarious.
Oh.
So here it is on my phone.
What?
One of my neighbors just sent this to me yesterday saying, you've got to listen to the new Sturgill Simpson album. And I listened to it yesterday while I was mowing the lawn.
There you go.
And it's like albums today are like a bunch of songs, right? What's it called? It's called the Ballad of Dude and Juanita.
Yes.
And all the songs tell a story, and they go from the beginning to the end. And I won't ruin it for the listeners, but I was hanging and hoping and not sure how it was going to end.
Yes.
And it's great. It's well done. It's a lot of fun. And outlaw country is a good word for him. Mm-hmm. He's not the formulaic commercial country guy. I think he doesn't give an F. I think he does what he wants. And he's an artist. It's beautiful. And country's not my go-to, but I love his twang. I love the music on it. This is a great album. Nice work. Any one song, since we officially can't say in a whole album, is there one song that's like better than the rest, or where should listeners start?
All right. So if my husband were to pick, he would say Sam, which is all about the dog. And Nick can now sing the entirety of it unprompted. So we've been listening. It's been out for like a week. So that tells you how good it is. So we'll go with Sam about the dog. It makes me want to get a dog.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. A good old hound dog.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then how about something on the more obscure, the more new side of things? Although this might count as both. I don't think a lot of our listeners might have bumped into this if you hadn't suggested it. So this is great.
Another one of my favorites is Waxahachie. She's more folky, also a little twang, blues, fun. And me and my sister are going to see her play in a couple of weeks. So I had to choose her. And the song that I would recommend is Sparks Fly. It's a little bit of a sister story, and it brings a tear to my eye. And I'm super excited to see it live with my sister.
Oh, that's great. Waxahachie, sparks fly. All right. Well, that's available on our 1+1 playlist. Again, we'll have some items in our show notes that we've discussed, a link to that great story about, I think they had hired one deaf electrician or tech, and he liked his job and he brought in a couple more. And pretty soon, I think they might have had like 5 deaf people on a crew, doing great work, building big solar projects down in Texas. So we'll have a link to that and some of the other stuff that you've put out there, Kelsey. Thanks so much for the journalism and work that you do with Solar Power World, as well as just who you are as a person in our industry. We're glad to have you becoming a leader in this space as we move to make our industry more representative of what our country looks like and make folks feel welcome to join the solar world and the clean energy opportunities out there that are just, from storage to energy efficiency to EV to solar to wind. It's booming, and we need all the talent we can get. So we need to do some work to make sure that we can attract that talent, make that talent feel welcome, and then retain that talent, keep them around, have them help shape our industry for the betterment of all of us. Thank you to our sponsor, Third Sun Solar, and thanks to our listeners. If this stuff is important to you, take a minute and review us. Give us 5 stars or an A+ or whatever the review might look like. Have your grandmother listen to us. Put it out on your socials. Unless you're out in your yard looking at squirrels, get on your socials and promote us and get the word out, because we do need a more diverse workforce if we're going to rise to the incredible opportunity and challenge of addressing global climate change. Kelsey, thanks again for being a guest, and this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Geoff. It's been a pleasure.